Thank you all again for the really good and productive discussions over these 2 days. We are at the final portion of the agenda, which I will begin, and Jake Sullivan, our National Security Advisor, will conclude. So I welcome every country in the Counter-Ransomware Initiative to give their national closing remarks. One housekeeping note, we're limited to 3 minutes of remarks, and I'll call on each member in order. And thank you as well as we make this note, not only for your remarks, but for the deep partnership and coordination that has gone on throughout the last year, as well as in these 2 days on our very productive discussions. So with that, let me begin by turning it over to Australia.
Well, thank you. And can I just restate some of the comments made yesterday about your leadership, that of your staff, that of the National Security Council and the broader Biden administration. It's been your vision and drive that's got us to this point, and we've got a wonderful platform with which to go forward. And to my fellow CRI members, colleagues, especially in the Disruption Working Group, but more generally, thank you for your tireless efforts in recent months as we've built to this in-person summit. It's just so wonderful to actually be able to meet in person. We've stated it so many times that I'll just state it summarily. We're in this together. It's a borderless threat, so therefore it needs a borderless response. We need to respect the fact that we have different legal authorities and capacities, and I think we've worked through those issues very well and got to a good equilibrium that balances the need to have an aggressive borderless response, but one that respects the equities of national jurisdictions. Ransomware, and as we've heard from our industry colleagues, which is evolving over time into data extortion, and no doubt it will keep evolving into other forms of pathologies, are not just simply criminal acts. They are operating now at a scale and a sophistication that's also a national security challenge, and that's been highlighted a number of times, including by our colleague from Ukraine and elsewhere. The security of our population is indeed at risk if that population does not have secure access to healthcare, to telecommunications, to energy, and so many other essential services of life. And so therefore we need to tackle this problem both as a criminal challenge, as it is, but also as a national security challenge, and one in which partnership is so central to success. I'm just so simply delighted that we've got to a great position of balancing the different time horizons and the different equities and the different complexities, especially as we now evolve the CRI into its very clearly demarcated and enduring streams, one of which particularly will focus on addressing and certainly hopefully solving complex policy challenges on an agile project-based approach, which we certainly support, whilst practitioners who are ready to operate with clear legal authorities at an unclassified level that will facilitate rapid information sharing at scale will come together through the task force. And thank you to all the colleagues who provided such thoughtful, wise commentary and feedback yesterday. It really helped to evolve our thinking about the task force. The task force will come together rapidly as we refine the terms of reference and scope over November. I'm determined that it'll be open for business on 1 January with a coordination unit that will both assist in working in partnership with our private partners to both scale up our defence and also to scale up our disruption. And as I said in the earlier session, we need to get to a point where it's not just defence and security by design, but it's disruption by design. And to you personally, thank you for your leadership, and I pass back to you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn it over to Austria.
Thank you, Anne. Dear fellow member states, in the last 2 days, 37 countries came together to discuss solutions for one of the biggest threats that we are facing in our digital time, and that is the threat of ransomware. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the National Security Council and foremost to you, Anne, for giving the fight against ransomware a broad and global platform that, at least that was my feeling, was deeply needed. And it's also a way to professionalize the fight against ransomware on an international level. The ransomware threat we're facing nowadays, and I think we all agree on that, cannot be solved by one single law enforcement or intelligence agency alone. It's not only a whole of government approach that is needed, but also that is not enough. A whole of society approach delivers a deeply needed piece to solve the global ransomware puzzle, which also needs to include predefined interfaces and cooperation with the private sector. Another important step to solve the global ransomware threat, in my opinion, and in the opinion of Austria, is the consistent information sharing. We saw a very interesting example for that with the pilot that was presented by the UAE and Israel. Thank you once again for the effort you put in that. It shows a visionary example for how a cross-border operational solution could look like that delivers a concrete and very positive outcome. The second counter-ransomware initiative summit successfully defined a comprehensive scoping of the most urgent problems that were outlined in the 5 working groups, and the hope is that it will set the stage for next concrete steps to secure critical infrastructure, businesses and governments in cyberspace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernd. We'll turn it over, please, to Belgium.
Thank you, Anne. To the counter-ransomware initiative. And the quality of the debates, the variety of angles discussed, as well as the concrete actions identified during these 2 days, show how valuable this forum is, and we thank the United States for hosting it. Cybercrime is a tremendous challenge to our societies. There is simply no alternative to close international cooperation to fight this malicious threat. So we welcome in particular the positioning of the counter-ransom initiative within the framework of international law. Different countries around the world are currently challenging the established individual rights and international principles based on the argument that cyberspace is a different domain. On the contrary, defending existing international law has to happen in international fora like the United Nations negotiations on cybercrime or the OEWG or GGE processes, but also by showing concrete results that it is possible to uphold these rights and principles when combating ransomware. New initiatives seldom emerge in a vacuum. The CRI finds its place in a growing field of actions in different fora and will hopefully be able to offer a new boost to multilateral efforts in this regard. We see particular value in the following fields: promotion of public-private partnership, as discussed at length during our sessions, and in this regard, it is also important to take in account existing processes such as the OECD confidence-building measures on ICTs. And secondly, focus on disruptive measures should go hand in hand with our cyber capacity building efforts, especially in those regions of the world where public institutions need supportive tools and framework to discourage cyber criminals. Such capacity building efforts are a shared interest for donors and recipient countries. The European Union, including Belgium, is increasingly attentive to this aspect in its development programs. Stakeholders like the Global Forum for Cyber Expertise could also be engaged for closer cooperation, as they built up already a lot of know-how over the years. At a national level, Belgium's ambition aims at being one of Europe's least vulnerable countries in the cyber domain by 2025. Our National Authority for Cybersecurity, CCB, focuses its efforts on all layers of society to resist cyber attacks and cybercrime with the aim to strengthen national resilience. To achieve this, our center uses the active cyber protection approach, which includes a spare warning approach and a ransomware pre-alert as well. Over the last few months, we have been able to warn numerous private entities and citizens about imminent ransomware threats. In this context, one of our biggest successes is our BFISH project, which fights against phishing, the biggest attack vector for ransomware. As an example, we received in 2021 4.5 million emails, from which we were able to block 1.5 malicious links. Active cyber protection represents a crucial improvement in the protection of our citizens and organizations against quickly evolving cyber threats, and is our tool to counter ransomware and increase our resilience. CRI is offering the opportunity to Belgium to exchange on these best practices. So from now on, we will be glad to take an active part to the debates and the work of the different groups within the CRI, and we look forward to a further cooperation within the Counter-Ransom Task Force, contributing to keeping cyberspace free, open, safe, and secure. Thank you.
Thank you. We're very glad we welcomed Belgium. Brazil?
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleagues. I would like first to thank the U.S. government for hosting this meeting. As many other countries, Brazil has been dealing with ransomware attacks, which are increasing in number and sophistication. Ransomware has become more complex and diverse as criminal groups themselves are developing operating system-based tools customized for the victim, and a market of ransomware as a service, RAAS, has been growing and making ransomware attacks more widespread. Brazil has been working hard to face these challenges and effectively counter ransomware, bringing its perpetrators to justice. As an example, after months of thorough investigation, the Brazilian Federal Police has very recently arrested a Brazilian national accused of being part of the Lapsus group, responsible for ransomware attacks against targets in Brazil and in several other countries. Being able to work effectively with digital evidence is a vital part of countering cybercrime in general and ransomware in particular. In Brazil, the civil framework for the International Act is based on the concept of service offered or provided in our national territory. The Act determines that Brazilian law must be applied in the collection, storage, and processing of data when one of the computer's terminals is located in Brazilian territory. This framework allows authorities to have direct access to electronic evidence and data collected from services provided in the country. A more cohesive framework of international cooperation and distribution of jurisdiction is a necessary step forward in persecuting ransomware. It is with this objective that Brazil is fully engaged in the negotiation in the United Nations of a multilateral comprehensive convention on countering the use of information and communication technologies for criminal purposes. We consider it a great opportunity to establish common standards for police and intelligence cooperation in tackling cybercrime, building on the international and regional instruments that already exist. From the Brazilian point of view, the current negotiations taking place at the UN have a lot to gain from the accumulated expertise of several international fora and initiatives. By focusing its efforts on exchanging technical expertise and cooperation to promote appropriate criminal justice tools to fight ransomware, the Counter-Ransomware Initiative can be one of these tools. Brazil also believes that if CRI wants to strengthen the participation, especially of the Global South, as mentioned during the discussions on the outcomes and next steps for the Diplomacy Working Group, the leadership of the CRI should take closer consideration to the concerns and inputs from all participant countries while negotiating outcome documents. With a more inclusive negotiation environment, Brazil believes that the CRI will have the potential to attract more partners from all over the world in order to fight ransomware. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to Brazil. Bulgaria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, first of all, I wish to thank US for inviting Bulgaria on the table here with you and discussing all this issue about countering the ransomware. On behalf of the cybercrime unit, the Bulgarian cybercrime unit, probably many of you are familiar with, I wish to express again our thanks that we were here, and we want to say that we are active international partner in the fight against the ransomware. What the cybercrime unit is trying to do is, first of all, building their capacity. We are trying to increase the level of knowledge during our employees and our colleagues, and also trying to bring more people and more enterprises in the fight against the ransomware. Probably you know, but in the cybercrime unit there is a 24/7 contact point for retention of data. This is what the cybercrime unit is trying to keep fast. As we hear during the last session with the private companies, this is one of the biggest issues that we recognize. Sometimes we have to admit that we are a little bit after the perpetrators, and especially what is happening in that really quick environment. So we're trying to be as fast as possible and to cooperate with our other countries and institutions. Recently, and also see as a development of the country, is changing in the criminal code of Bulgaria, where we have a little bit higher penalties for cybercrimes. And this is what we achieve as a country to show and present to the publicity that we recognize this as a huge problem, and we will fight with this in the future with all other partners. We stay open, and we will be in the future involved in any kind of international cooperation with all other countries, and we hope that those CR meetings will continue in the future, and we will join them for sure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bulgaria. Canada.
Thank you very much. So on behalf of Canada, I would like to thank the United States for hosting us and for your leadership in accelerating the cooperation to counter ransomware through the CRI. Particularly thanks to you, Anne, for your tremendous leadership over the last couple of days and clearly in leading this group. We'd also like to thank the country leads of each of the working groups for the leadership and support they've provided throughout the year. We value the CRI's input and perspective on enhancing this work to combat and protect against ransomware. On a personal note, as someone who has deep roots in the national security and intelligence community in Canada, but with very limited access to the ransomware discussion, I have found this a profound masterclass. So thank you very much to colleagues who have greater knowledge than I do, and I think it'll be very useful to me in the leadership role I've assumed at the Department of Public Safety. So thank you very much for that. I will personally take away some interesting reflections on the parallels to old approaches that we have used to counter national security threats. And there are many lessons that we should derive from that, but of course to the radical differences that we've been talking about, in particular the private public sector piece of this, and just how important it is for us to think outside of the box. And that is sometimes very difficult for old intelligence professionals to do that type of thing, but a really important reflection for us. Ransomware, as we've all talked about the last couple of days, growing national security threat. In Canada, it compromises the safety of Canadian citizens, the security of their online environment, and the prosperity of our economy. The same is very true for all of you. And this is why the Government of Canada engages in a variety of domestic and international efforts to address ransomware and other malicious cyber threats. Domestically, we have a national cybersecurity strategy. It was announced in 2018. It's currently being reviewed, so today and yesterday's discussions have come at a very opportune moment for us as a significant input into the renewed cyber strategy we hope to deliver in the coming months. Canada is going to continue in that strategy to foster secure and resilient systems, an innovative and adaptive cyber ecosystem, and effective leadership, governance, and collaboration. Furthermore, this past June, we announced further steps to strengthen our cybersecurity with the introduction of a bill, an act respecting cybersecurity. This proposed legislation will protect Canadians and bolster cybersecurity across the financial, telecommunications, energy, and transportation sectors, and require mandatory reporting in some situations. We look forward to sharing with all of you some of the lessons that we learn as we embark on that work. Internationally, Canada is proud to work collaboratively with a number of partners, including the CRI, to more closely align policies, activities, public messaging, and industry engagement. Again, you'll note, Michael, our commitment to supporting you as we shape this task force upcoming, and our interest in in delivering on some important immediate impacts. As we continue efforts to mitigate the threat of ransomware, it is of vital importance that we come together in fora like these to identify where international coordination can be a force multiplier, as we've discussed over the past few days, to make our policies and efforts more effective. We've had success in this space before, and I remain optimistic that our collective work will show real achievements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Canada. Croatia. Czech Republic, please.
On behalf of the Czech Republic, I would like to extend my appreciation to the Deputy National Security Advisor Ann Neuberger and the United States for convening this year's Counter-Ransomware Summit. Ransomware is a national security imperative. We can no longer see ransomware as a type of organized crime carried out by non-state actors. Cybercriminals very often act in close coordination and on behalf of states, including Russia. Ransomware has become a great source of illicit profit for authoritarian regimes, and we must work together to counter this threat. We are particularly concerned with the rise of ransomware as a service. Ransomware groups are being increasingly instrumentalized by Russia, including in the context of ongoing Russian aggression against Ukraine. The Czech Republic is not immune to ransomware. We faced ransomware attacks targeting our hospitals, transport infrastructure, and universities. We remain committed to strengthening our resilience, sharing threat information, improving detection, and holding ransomware actors accountable. Let me make 5 final points. First, regulatory framework and incident reporting obligation play a key role in detecting ransomware attacks. Such obligation exists in the Czech Republic since 2014 and has proven fundamental in protecting our critical infrastructure. Second, tackling ransomware requires adjustment in our law enforcement and investigation procedures. We will establish a new unit dedicated to terrorism and cybercrime under the police of the Czech Republic as of January 2023. Third, we must share the same threat picture with our like-minded and industry partners. Joint cyber threat intelligence and situational awareness is essential to combat ransomware. 4, we need to consider all means, including diplomatic measures, sanctions, in our collective reaction to ransomware attacks. And finally, resilience in cyberspace is also one of our key 5 political priorities of the ongoing Czech presidency in the Council of the EU. The Czech Republic remains committed to working with like-minded countries and invites other states to join counter-ransomware initiative today to combat ransomware together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dominican Republic.
The government of the Dominican Republic is pleased to respond to the invitation to be part of the counter-ransomware initiative. Thanks very much. We recognize the leadership and the great work that the government of the United States has done in relation to this initiative and the leading role of the countries that coordinate the working groups. My respects and congratulations to all of you. As a country who has been striving for more than 20 years to contribute to a safer global cyberspace, we are honored to be part of this initiative and look forward to working together with other states and interested stakeholders to accelerate cooperation to counter ransomware, including improving collective resilience, addressing the misuse of virtual currencies to launder ransom payments, and investigating and prosecuting ransomware criminals. We are immersed in an intense process of digital transformation, and given the complexity of the threat that this entails, we have focused on our national cybersecurity strategy, on collaboration principles that allow us to promote connectivity, democracy, peace, the rule of law, sustainable development, and the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms. However, the government cannot achieve our cyber resilience goals alone. The private sector owns and operates much of our nation's critical infrastructure. There is only one way to defend the state from cyber threat, and that is through government, industry, and civil society working together, sharing appropriate information, and raising awareness and education as allies behind the same goals. It is for this reason that participating in the counter-ransomware initiative is of strategic importance to us, while contributing to the achievement of the objective of our 2030 digital agenda and the digital transformation and cybersecurity cabinets, both coordinated by the Ministry of the Presidency with the full support of our President of the Dominican Republic. Please use our beautiful island in the Caribbean as a hub to invite other Latin American countries to join this initiative. We highly value the results of the working groups and the contributions that each of the countries represented here have made based on their experience and their realities. These efforts are demonstration that we all aspire to have strong democracies and protect our citizens and our economies. Therefore, count with the active participation of the Dominican Republic in this initiative, which is fundamental to building secure cyberspace in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The remainder members of the CRI are wondering why the invitation to your beautiful island is only extended to Latin American countries. Thank you. We turn to Estonia.
Thank you. I'm pleased to announce that quite many Estonian IT people are already in the Dominican Republic, and there's some projects, especially focusing on the regional cybersecurity issues. Let me make 3 points. First of all, I am so grateful that this group is a global group, at least with a global reach and global ambition. Otherwise, we tend to kind of have this reputation, at least in Europe, in North America, that we have some kind of own agenda. This is not the case, because we're all sharing the same challenge and we need the same solutions. A second aspect that I really enjoyed with this work here is this action-oriented approach. And this is definitely something we should not, we should keep the focus on this action-oriented approach, because there are so many initiatives that start with a hooray, and then there are more and more issues coming to the table, and in the end, it's a really general work that has been done. I'm definitely taking back some ideas on how we can also use what we have in Estonia for the benefit of this group. We talk about different cyber exercises, and we have been doing many of these. We're talking about different institutions or cyber capabilities that we have. I'm definitely going to come back next time with a much bigger package, hopefully. But this definitely gave me some good ideas to which direction I should be looking at. And I'm also very optimistic about the dialogue with the industry. I think it showed quite clearly that there's so much more to talk and so much more ground to cover, so that we could be on the same page. So with these points, thank you very much, and I really look forward to the next timetables and the next plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Estonia, and thank you for noting that we each contribute as well as gain from this particular group. European Commission, please.
Thank you, and I don't have prepared remarks. I agree 100% with what everybody has said. I'm sure I will agree 100% of what others are still going to say, and just coincidentally, I also have 3 points that I wanted to make. I was just thinking, I mean, what is a historic building? What is historic what we're doing here? I mean, I think what we have achieved, of course, starting a year ago under your leadership, but then I think yesterday and today, I think we'll look back in the future and say this was a decisive turning point in the fight against ransomware. I mean, we're agreed to join forces, we're agreed to broaden and deepen our cooperation. I mean, broaden, I also need to think about the European Union. We're not here around the table with 27 member states, so there are a few more to come, hopefully next time, and broaden also in the sense of the global south. I hope everybody will do the necessary outreach, broaden also in the sense of we need to find ways to associate, integrate the private sector, and hopefully in the context of the further reflections on the task force, I mean, we'll see concrete proposals. But I think what we've been doing here, we are very powerful together. I'm very kind of, I go home, I mean, after these meetings, I'm optimistic that this is something, it's a fight we can win. So that was and thank you, Anne, and thank you to the chairs for your leadership, I think for the excellent discussion, also for your listening to, I think, what was going around the debate. We evolved over the last, say, 24, 36 hours, so this is great. I think somebody at the beginning yesterday, I think it was Margiris, said we need strong commitment of everybody. I mean, the EU has that strong commitment, and I have full confidence that that's true for everybody else. So that is my first point, the longest. The second is very short, and I come back to it, and it's like a stuck record. There are excellent recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force, and I think some of you, I mean, Giles and David, and also over lunch at the Treasury, implement them. I mean, this will, if this is like about fighting fires, the best way to fight fires is to take oxygen away. Because then the fire will extinguish itself. A fire cannot rage on without oxygen. If you take the money, the incentive away, a lot of the fire will simply die because it's not worth anymore. The business model has failed. So if we could all take that commitment, maybe by the second anniversary of the counter ransomware summit, that we've all implemented it and then enforced it, that would be absolutely great. The third is we can learn a lot from each other, the exchanges of best practices. I mean, we in the European Union, we have, I mean, the Czech Republic referred to that, we have security breach notification, we have kind of further measures in the work. We're also now working on securing objects that are connected to the internet. So there's a lot that we can share with you. I mean, we have not found the stone of wisdom in the European Union. I'm afraid, having looked for it for a very long time, that it may not be in the European Union. And if it's somewhere else in your jurisdiction, then please allow us to share that stone of wisdom with you. But there is a lot that I think also in the follow-up we can learn from each other, and the European Union stands absolutely ready to share its experiences, both good and bad, with you. And with that, thank you, and looking very much forward to the next steps.
Thank you very much. Michael kicked off by saying we are in this together. Jared, as you noted, we are powerful together. So that is those two comments really very much are bookends of what we're seeking to do here. Thank you. Franz.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. Thank you for this initiative. Well, I'm also optimistic, and I also have 3 points. So I think we learned the same thing in our different schools. Well, optimistic without kidding, because we are not talking about very, very complex cyber attacks coming from big states with unlimited means. We're talking about cyber criminals. And the problems does not come from the skills of those criminals, even if we don't have to underestimate them, but the problem comes from the huge variety of very weak potential victims. So that's why this initiative is important. So my 3 points. The first one is that whatever we do, if we are not able to convince those weak victims that they must protect themselves, they must work on their security, they must try to detect the attacks, they must prepare for the worst things, we can do whatever we want, it will fail. And today this is the main problem. And the discussion with the private sector was very interesting because we see that we all have a kind of responsibility, but at the end we are not yet able to convince all those potential victims that they need to protect themselves, that it's their problem. So prevention, protection must remain the top priority, and I don't have the magic solution to push this idea. The second thing is that efficient solutions requires international cooperation. That's what we are doing, and also private-public partnership. Alone, that's my experience, but I'm sure you do the same. We just do kind of emergency medicine. And, well, I like to help people. I like to help companies, to help hospitals and so on, but it's not the solution. And this cooperation is exactly the spirit of this ransomware initiative. And I have to make some advertisement. It's also the spirit of the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace. But again, I joke, but it is the same idea to get all the stakeholders around the same table to try to find collectively some solutions. And finally, my last point is about insurance. It was very clear in our discussions that insurance can be part of a solution. It is part of a solution, but it can also be part of a problem. So if we are able to find some good rules and to collectively implement those rules, it can be done only at the national level or even European level. It must be international level. If we are able to implement good rules, insurance will be a part of a solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to Germany, and I want to thank Germany as well for leading one of the 5 CRI panels, the diplomacy panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I would also like to start my remarks with echoing what previous speakers already said, and thank you for your leadership and also for all the work that has gone into organizing this event. I have 3.5 takeaways, so I obviously have been to a different school. The first one is what I take home from here is the impressive model of the US, Team United States, cross-government engagement and dedication to the cause. And this is something that certainly can be improved, at least in the German system, and I take it away as a challenge also for our system. Second, you mentioned already, I invested most of my time here in the diplomacy working group. I take home that there is a strong support for what we do, also as diplomats, to support practitioners' endeavor to combat ransomware, to combat cybercrime. We have several venues where to do this. The ad hoc committee on cybercrime, where a new treaty has been negotiated on the global level, is one. But also smaller opportunities and where we can become visible also as a pressure group to combat cybercrime, like the Paris Peace Forum, where we chairs meet again at the end of next week. My third point is we need more capacity building, and this is something that we have on our agenda for the next 12 months to come up with some concrete ideas for capacity building projects. I'm very grateful for US commitment also here to be part of this effort. As a G7 presidency, we have started an action plan with ECOWAS, so with Western African countries, and I'm very happy that Nigeria volunteered to co-chair the next round of the diplomatic working group together with me. And my half point at the end is this has been a very, very productive session. So reporting home will be a nightmare.
It's far better than the alternative that France highlighted during the discussions. Thank you very much, Germany. We'll now turn to India, with thanks to India for co-leading the Resilience Working Group.
Thank you, Anne, for being the mentor of our group. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There is a phrase that we are all working shoulder to shoulder, and it can be best exemplified in the way we are sitting and the way we worked in the last 2 days. And I think if someone takes a picture of this table, this powerful table, it'll send some shivers down the spine of these criminals that we are chasing. So with that positive note at the outset, let me compliment all the participating nations for being part of this first in-person and second historic congregation of government representatives and private partners in this CRI. We genuinely appreciate the US initiative of bringing 36 nations and the European Union on a common platform to discuss and find solutions to improve our domestic as well as collective resilience, misuse of virtual currency, and need to investigate and disrupt the network of perpetrators of this ransomware. The exponential growth of ransomware attacks worldwide has underscored the need for global and regional cooperation in both mitigating the attacks as well as devising internationally accepted policies and procedures to attribute and disrupt the threat actors. At the domestic level, governments should consider law enforcement and incident response policies addressing ransomware that can also benefit the overall resilience of the nation. Industry, as we have seen, has an important role to play as well, not just in instances where critical infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector, but also when it comes to the cyber insurance sector. India has been at the receiving end as we have been facing many ransomware attacks on our critical infrastructure. To counter this menace, we need to work collectively with countries and combine our collective knowledge, expertise, and capabilities to disrupt and degrade the ransomware ecosystem and hold accountable those that are responsible. The Counter Ransomware Initiative has given all of us this platform and opportunity to brainstorm and get the most tangible outcomes from the discussions in the 5 working groups. In fact, by virtue of these discussions, we have improved our comprehensive and holistic understanding of the strategies used by ransomware actors and the means by which their malicious activity can be identified and addressed in respective jurisdictions by improving our tools, tactics, and procedures. Our experience as the lead in Resilience Working Group along with Lithuania was indeed an intense experience. We also saw during the discussions that public-private partnership has emerged as a point of consensus, which can be an important aspect of effective incident response efforts. Many ransomware victims in the private sector do not have in-house capabilities for addressing and remediating ransomware incident. A basic incident response infrastructure like the proposed Joint Task Force can play a significant role in these cases. Sharing of timely threat intelligence amongst the stakeholders will also give the required situational awareness to prevent the incident. India will be keen to collaborate and cooperate with the CRI member countries in countering the threats emanating from ransomware attacks, for which we will be focused on expanding the capacity building activities, information sharing, enhancing CERT-to-CERT cooperation, establish and share guidelines on sector-specific cybersecurity standards, and practice the same through the conduct of biannual cyber exercise. We also propose to establish a dedicated ransomware platform called Malware Kosh to support, analyze, share, and collaborate counter-ransomware activities for responding to ransomware incidents. This platform, as we demonstrated to you yesterday, will also carry out the analysis of ransomware artifacts and samples and also act as a repository for these samples. To conclude, I would like to say that it is our collective responsibility to ensure that the global cyberspace is not dominated by criminal activities like ransomware, and we create a safe, secure, and resilient cyberspace for our future generation. I wish this unique coalition converts our collective resolve into ensuring a ransomware-free cyberspace. And I'm sure that the network effect that will happen after the task force is formed will exponentially increase our response to ransomware. Finally, India thanks USA and Team Ann for hosting this event. I wish the non-DC members safe travels back home to your countries, and thanks also to the UK and Australia for the champagne. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, India, for the gratitude for all the contributors. Let's turn it over to Ireland.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, first of all, I'd like to thank UN and the NSC staff, for the vision and leadership in getting us to this point in the first place and coming up with the idea, and to the work group chairs for all of the hard work to bring the various different work streams to the point that they are. I mean, the context, really briefly, everybody knows that ransomware has grown from a nuisance issue to being a real proximate risk to national security and our future prosperity. And that kind of cross-cutting, dynamic, international problem necessitates a global response. I'll introduce a concept from Irish history of a mehel. It's a cooperative. It's a group of people who come together to deal with a task. Could be any task, a harvest, whatever it might be. they work together in collective action to do something that individually they can't. Ireland is proud to be part of this new cyber mahel, forgive me, which will hopefully help us all work together to achieve something we couldn't do alone, to break the back of these ransomware operators. We're particularly proud to be part of this disruption by design, I'm stealing that saying categorically, process in taking the fight to the bad guys as quickly as we can. Also, we're particularly happy to be able to exercise our diplomatic levers as far as they exist to help put pressure on those countries that continue to harbour the actors who are responsible for this ultimately. Ultimately, there are people behind this, not just insensate objects. And lastly, we're particularly happy to be able to work with private industry to help encourage and move people along to a path not just towards greater resilience, but also towards greater information sharing with governments as to what is actually happening out there. We all are short-sighted as to what's happening in the real world, for want of a better term. And finally, we're particularly happy to work on the Joint Counter-Ransomware Task Force. It offers a really significant opportunity to collectively engage with these issues in a dramatic, dynamic way. And it also, of course, lastly, poses a challenge to us all domestically to better organise our own domestic functions, to take down, to remove, to police, to engage with the threat across our communities, whether it's healthcare, government, or the private sector. It's a collective national and international effort. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ireland, for those comments. We'll turn it over to Israel.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Anne, for leading this initiative, and to your staff for supporting and suffering us. And to the chairs that did a great job during the last 2 years and during those 2 days. Ransomware is a national security issue. We see that in many countries, also in Israel. We are building our fusion cell that incorporates shoulder to shoulder the Israeli National Cyber Directorate, the Israeli National Police, the Privacy Authority, and the FIU. And we see the CRI as a force multiplier for this local effort. This is the gate to the world, and both for supporting this initiative and for receiving added value from this initiative. 5 takeouts that I took from the last 2 days. The first one is hopefully in the next year, when we sit down here, we have started to solve the issue of visibility, of understanding what is happening in the ransomware environment. Who is being attacked, how much we are paying. So getting this visibility is a very important cornerstone. Second, maybe we have started to think how to solve the legal, international legal issue, so we can get the attackers on cyber pace and not on legal pace. Otherwise, we are in a problem. So thinking about this during this year is very important. Third thing is, again, working shoulder to shoulder in the task force and in the fusion cell to deal with the spaghetti, the meatballs, and the plates. Great framework. And this is something feasible. This is something that can bring real value this year to us. Fourth is the private-public partnership. I believe that after seeing a small sample from the industry, we have a lot of work to do. But still, they are a crucial part of the solution. Talking about security by design and default and disruption by design, auto-patching, getting the visibility that we are talking, they are part of the solution, and they should be, again, with us shoulder to shoulder sitting in this table. Last but not least, information sharing platforms. We saw 2 excellent examples of initiatives by Lithuania and by India. Malware Kush is something that we know how to say already, and we didn't see the system yet, but a lot of potential. And we, together with the United Arab Emirates, will be happy to contribute a part of this solution of info sharing to the CRI. So thank you very much, and looking forward for the next year.
Thank you very much, and thank you for noting some of the statements that we can all chuckle about as part of the human part of partnership, from disruption by design to shoulder to private-public partnership, and with thanks to the Dutch National Police, none of us will ever look at spaghetti and meatballs the same way. Let us turn it over now to Italy.
Thank you. First of all, let me join my colleagues in thanking you, Madam Chair, and the youth team for this key initiative and for organizing and hosting such a successful event. I would like also to thank the chairs of the working groups and the participating members for their significant contributions to our strengths of work. If, as it has been said, cyber is the ultimate team sport, we can say that the CRI conference has underscored an excellent interaction among very committed team players, which recognize that ransomware is a growing global threat that requires a joint international response. A cross-cutting and holistic approach is therefore extremely relevant, bringing together in a synergic way the various actors involved in combating ransomware, connecting resilience mechanism with disruption and other law enforcement capabilities, as well as instruments to counter the profitability of the ransomware model. These joint efforts should also involve the research community and the private sector. In this perspective, we think that the strategic vision and the pragmatism which characterize the counter-ransomware initiative have the potential of attracting new members. We know that we are advancing into, to some extent, uncharted waters, but we are confident that we can effectively face the challenge of ransomware if we join forces in a concrete way. At the same time, we think that this timely conference has reinforced our awareness that change cannot be postponed in our approach to counter this set of destabilizing criminal activities. Recognizing that our fight against ransomware is per se multidimensional, we welcome the flexible platform of cooperation that has been developing by CRI, including in its possible crucial interaction with the private sector. Against this background, Italy welcomes the establishment of the counter-ransomware task force that we consider a very useful tool to promote further collaboration within our community, which is, this is something important to us, is a community of values. I'm glad, therefore, to reiterate Italy's strong commitment to the CRI and our willingness to offer our contribution in order to reach the important objectives delineated in our joint statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Italy. We turn it over to Japan.
Thank you. The second CRI summit has been a great success, or it's already evident. And we appreciate Ms. Neuberger and her team for taking the initiative to organize this event. And our gratitude also goes to the lead countries of the working group for their valuable work. Getting together in person was significant because not only did it allow us to discuss the substance, but also we were able to show the spirit and solidarity, particularly sitting shoulder to shoulder in this room. Cybersecurity vulnerabilities are a risk factor for the entire world. That's why Japan values cooperation with like-minded countries. In Japan, damages from ransomware have been spreading. A hospital was targeted, and it suspended the provision of medical services. A major automobile manufacturer suppliers halted the manufacturing operation and shipment of automobiles. Yesterday, so the very yesterday, a cyber attack occurred and caused interruption of medical services at hospital in Osaka. And 146 cases of ransomware attacks were reported to the National Police Agency in 2021. And in the first half of 2022, the number has already reached 114, and the number is increasing steadily. So in the case of Russian aggression against Ukraine, We are aware that destructive cyber attacks using ransomware and similar means had started before the physical aggression to Ukraine. And we have to recognize this as a national security threat, not only just an economic threat. Thus, it is important for critical infrastructure operators and private business and our government agencies to prevent ransomware damage from occurring. But also, it is an important challenge how to stop the social and economic disruption in a short period of time after the event. Japan has provided information to the Cybersecurity Council and the guidance for sharing and publishing information on cyber attack damage regarding public-private partnerships, and we expect that it can be referred to as a case studies to promote information sharing between the public and private sectors to be promoted by the CRI in the future. In addition, the promotion of existing capacity building programs, including multi-stakeholder efforts as indicated in the CRI statement, is an important initiative to combat ransomware. Japan has been providing capacity building support mainly in the Indo-Pacific region, including ASEAN countries. In light of the growing importance of the Indo-Pacific region, we plan to continue providing strategic and effective support in cooperation with various actors such as like-minded countries, international organizations, and industry and academia. International cooperation against ransomware threat is important. We will continue to work with CRI partners. Lastly, Japan would like to emphasize the importance of building on the framework of Code of Conduct for Responsible States agreed upon at the United Nations and its national implementations, as is mentioned in the CRI statement. This is important to enhance the rule-based international order, and Japan looks forward to working with the CRI partners to secure a cyberspace that is free, fair, and safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Japan. Kenya.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to you, Anne, and your team for the great leadership that you've provided unto us, and to the US for the leadership in this summit, as well as the lead countries that have taken us through and have been guiding us in this process. Kenya has made strides to boost her cybersecurity capacity by enacting the Cyber Crimes Act and Anti-Money Laundering Act, as well as other legislation, and we are soldiering forward to continuing with the fight against ransomware. Kenya is looking forward to working with other CRI members to counter this global threat that is affecting all of us. In Kenya, just like in many other countries, has faced cyber attacks, and with growing digitization, we can only grow stronger, coalesce our efforts, and work together as partner nations. We look forward to becoming a more engaging partner to fight ransomware. This CRI initiative is a formidable platform, and we look forward to more partner nations, especially from the African continent, to be part of this great initiative to find working solutions to fight the challenge. On a personal note, I have learned a lot out of these great discussions that we have had in the past 2 days. And once again, I thank the US for hosting us and for the leadership in this initiative. Kenya is honored to be part of it, and we look forward to more fruitful engagements. Together, let us fight to counter ransomware, to protect our countries, our businesses, our economies, and our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kenya. Let us turn it now to Lithuania, with thanks to Lithuania for co-leading the Resilience Working Group with India.
Thanks, Anne, and thanks for those 2 days of very inclusive and stimulating discussions, I would say. And I have 2 short takeaways and 1 quick comment. So my first takeaway, and I would join those who are optimistic, looking to the future. I think, although yesterday from some presentations we could get a sense that despite all our efforts we are losing, I think it would be a wrong mindset to think. I think we are not winning yet. So that is the right mindset, and I believe that we are in a better position than we were 1 year ago. I think that is, we should acknowledge that, building the relationship and cooperation, we are really better off today. And looking to the future with the task force, I think we will be even better prepared to address the ransomware threat. The second takeaway, and my favorite topic, commitment. I think that, and those two days showed that different countries are bringing different commitment to the table, and that is important. The commitment you can understand by national efforts, what you do nationally, also by what you contribute to the collective effort. So that is we see that commitment. It's good, and we should continue bringing that commitment to the table. Only by this we can have a result. On our end, we will continue facilitating the information sharing, and I think that is as it was highlighted many times, a very important role. And last but not least, the comment which I probably had to make yesterday, because we had a very stimulating cyber diplomacy discussion yesterday, and I think both camps, or how you say it, were right yesterday. Definitely, in the context of this initiative, we are addressing and dealing with criminals, and that is true. But we should not forget where about 75% of ransomware attacks are coming from. This is not a coincidence, but they are coming from Russia. So we can be successful halfway if we approach it only as a criminal activity. We can win this if we approach it comprehensively. This format is probably not the one. We have other means probably, and Ukraine, I hope will help us to solve this issue. So really, really optimistic about what we are doing and what we can achieve together. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lithuania. We will add that to our CRI quick statements. We aren't losing, we're not winning yet. Excellent. Let's turn to Mexico.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this second CRI summit. During the previous year, Mexico has participated in 5 working groups where we have shared experience, recognized challenges, and acknowledged opportunities to prevent and combat ransomware. In Mexico, we have implemented a national cybersecurity strategy with the main objectives to execute the homologate national protocol for cyber incident management, developed by National Guard. This protocol promotes the adequate implementation of the risk management vision and cyber resilience based on international best practices, as well as preservation of digital forensic evidence and presentation of the case before the Public Prosecutor's Office to guarantee the prosecution and administration of justice. In this context, National Guard's main objective is to influence cultural change to deal with the illicit use of information technologies that lead to attacks such as ransomware. The purpose is to educate citizens and public and private institutions on dealing with this type of activity, which constitute a crime. Currently, Mexico has the necessary legal tools to sanction those who engage in this type of illegal behavior, ensuring that there is not impunity for cyber criminals. The National Guard has given workshops about this protocol to around 50 public and private entities and has trained approximately 400 officers who are responsible for cybersecurity with a multidimensional risk management approach. Furthermore, Mexico is working with the United Nations towards a comprehensive convention against cybercrime. This will allow the foundation for a global legislative harmonization that will combat the impunity of those who make illicit use of information and communication technology. Currently, Mexican Congress is preparing a bill in coordination with different sectors of society that will provide a legislative framework for a comprehensive cybersecurity model. The CRI must concentrate on the following challenge and opportunity to dismantle the continued threats. One, create a protocol for preventing and investigating ransomware crimes that define the roles of the multiple stakeholders, acknowledging the interdependence between actors and the private sector role in preventing, containing, and contributing digital evidence. It is crucial to highlight that unlike conventional crime, in cybercrime, the evidence is in the hands of the third party, particularly in the extensive information and communication technology companies. Therefore, a partnership with them to provide evidence promptly will lead to an adequate prosecution of the case. Two, develop a toolkit for the CRI's members that allow for specialized police to act as a first responders to obtain the evidence for the different lines of investigations. Three, implement a comprehensive system for investigating and tracking crypto assets using the tools other nations have developed. An example of this is Australia's GraphSense tools. 4, create a database that may identify different types of malicious actors that operate in the ransomware ecosystems. 5, promote the implementation of an approved system that collects cyber attack information to share it with other countries without revealing the identity and vulnerabilities of the victim. Mexico is committed to seeking a free cyberspace where human rights are respected and the exercise of legal activities is guaranteed to promote economic, political, and social development for the benefit of our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mexico, and thank you for the actionable suggestions as well. The Netherlands.
First of all, I also would like to thank our American hosts for your leadership and for organizing this excellent summit. And also many thanks to the working group leads and participants that have worked out throughout the year to bring our collective work forward. And since we met last year, the amount and impact of ransomware attacks has not decreased. In fact, ransomware has taken on industrial proportions in terms of victims, damage, and criminal proceeds. And together, we need to scale up our efforts accordingly. And we need to do so with all means available, justicial, diplomatic, technical, and financial. And in criminal investigations, it's always, and here especially, important to follow the money. Countering the illicit use of crypto assets is a key issue in combating ransomware and therefore deserves specific attention. Not only are enhanced Know Your Customer rules for crypto assets and asset service providers necessary on a global scale, we also need to step up our law enforcement efforts in tracing crypto transactions that conceal criminal money flows and facilitate money laundering. Cooperation across borders and boundaries remains essential. Recently, as you already heard from Theo, thanks to a tip from a cybersecurity firm, the Dutch police was able to trick a ransomware actor and get hold of 150 decryption keys, allowing files of victims in 13 countries to be unlocked. And this case illustrates that working together, both internationally and with the private sector, and being creative leads to results. Apart from disrupting their business model, ransomware actors and their enablers need to be held to account and brought to justice, no matter where they reside or operate. And this also requires strong international cooperation. The recent arrest in the Netherlands of a developer of a so-called crypto mixing service, suspected of being used to conceal large-scale criminal money flows, and the recent US conviction of a member of the Netwalker gang demonstrate our collective commitment to pursuing criminal actors. Innovative tools and framework that build upon and optimize the use of existing platforms, as well as cooperation across borders and boundaries, will be instrumental to enhancing our resilience and to keep countering and preventing ransomware effectively. I want to express my gratitude to all colleagues present. It has been inspiring to discuss these important issues with all of you these past 2 days, and I look forward to our further cooperation. And the Netherlands will gladly play an active role in all working groups in the forthcoming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nigeria.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's a good afternoon. I would like to start, first of all, by congratulating the US for successfully hosting the second CRI summit and the first in-person one with members sitting shoulder to shoulder. It's really been a great one having this network. Indeed, the benefit and relevance are invaluable, I must say. The debate was qualitative, highly informative, and very directional. A big thank you to the working group leads for the very useful presentations. And oh yes, it's one of the most beautiful things having one of my gender on the other side, at the center of the table, drive this discussion excellently and productively. Nigeria notes that a global problem needs a global approach, and international cooperation is key in fighting cybercrimes, and in this case, the menace of ransomware. Nigeria recognizes Nigeria recognizes the need to apply some of the universal best cybersecurity practices that can dramatically reduce the likelihood of ransomware incidences and reduce risks from other cyber threats. Nigeria is also committed to strengthening and enhancing her existing legal framework to ensure conformity of the cybercrime and cybersecurity laws and policies with regional and international standards. Maintenance of international cooperation required for preventing and combating cybercrimes and promoting cybersecurity and effective prosecution of cybercrimes and cybersecurity matters. Accordingly, Nigeria has done the following. It's reviewed the National Cybersecurity Policy and Strategy in 2021. A key component of that is strengthening of the legal framework, which has been a topic of discussion here, and identification of critical national information infrastructure. It established the Computer Emergency Response Team, which is responsible for managing cyber incidences in Nigeria, which is housed in the Office of the National Security Advisor. The NG CERT gives advisories based on information gathered from other countries. We've received information from the UK, the US, Tunisia, and I think one other country, some who are members of the CRI. It also houses the National Digital Forensic Laboratory, which helps in the extraction of digital evidence. Though it has less than moderate trained and ready workforce, provision is made within the legal framework to develop capacity, particularly in view of the nature of cybercrime. And that's why discussions on capacity building is key for us as well. It's carried out an evaluation and identification of critical national information infrastructure in compliance with domestic legislation, which is the Cybercrimes Prohibition, Prevention, etc. Act, and the Presidential Gazette, as well as work on modalities to develop protection plans for the CNII is in the works. In considering information sharing as key, Nigeria created channels to aid information sharing between the government and private sector, as well as with the public. So we have sectoral certs that manage incidences in their respective sectors, and then they link with the NG certs, which gives the relevant guidance to enhance resilience. It's also established the Cybercrimes Advisory Council, which is a creation of the law, the Cybercrimes Act, and it is well manned by senior leaders that are influential and are involved in cybersecurity decision-making. It is led by the National Security Advisor. Noting that coordinated capacity building has potential to serve as a force multiplier in the fight against ransomware, it also initiated discussion with some international organizations and bilateral engagements to explore avenues to help with capacity building for criminal justice sector actors that are involved in cybercrime, particularly for prosecutors and investigators, which we see as very key to this issue. It's also initiated an amendment process for the extant cybercrime legislation to incorporate virtual assets and virtual asset service providers. So like Canada earlier mentioned, discussions on the table are very, very important to us, and they are take home for us, so that we'll be able to also incorporate them in the review process. The amended Money Laundering Prohibition and Prevention Act 2022 now recognizes virtual asset service providers as financial institutions and virtual assets as funds, and defines predicate offenses using virtual assets. And and Nigeria has also acceded to the Cybercrimes Convention and the Budapest Convention of the Council of Europe in July 2022, which will take effect for the country in November. Nigeria notes the importance of cybersecurity awareness and the need to imbibe the practice of good cyber hygiene. Accordingly, sensitization programs were conducted by the Office of the National Security Advisor, and this has covered both government and public sectors. And in some organizations, cyber drills were conducted. Nigeria is also dedicated to joining efforts in the disruption of ransomware business model and associated money laundering activities by ensuring the national AML CFT framework effectively identifies and mitigates risks which is associated with virtual assets and VASP activities. Though there is currently no policy on payment of ransomware, the National FIU, in collaboration with the Security and Exchange Council and the FinTech Association of Nigeria, are pursuing ways through new regulatory mechanisms to enhance cooperation with the virtual asset industry on ransomware-related information sharing. Importantly, the New Proceeds of Crime Act, because this year we've had two key legislations. This is the second of it. Recovery and Management Act 2022, it empowers law enforcement agencies to seize and confiscate proceeds of cybercrime, including ransomware payment. In conclusion, Nigeria wishes to restate her commitment and dedication to eliminating safe havens for cybercriminals within her territory and doing the needful to contribute to the global effort. And this commitment is certainly reflected in Nigeria's active participation in the work of the UN Ad Hoc Committee on Cybercrime and the recent accession to the Budapest Convention by the Council of Europe. I would like to say thank you to Anne and the wonderful team for the warm reception. Thank you for the UK for a beautiful evening yesterday, and to Australia in advance for a good one today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. Let's turn it now to Norway.
Thank you, Chair. Dear CRI colleagues, first, thank you, Anne, and thank you to the US for hosting us and for the CRI Leadership Initiative. I also want to appreciate the work being done in the work groups between these summits. I don't think it's been mentioned, but there's a lot of good work going on between the meetings, and this leads up to our summits. This is our first summit since Norway joined the CRI initiative in February. Norway highly appreciates the US initiative for increased counter-ransomware cooperation. Cooperation, internationally, nationally, and with private company, is necessary to counter this challenge of counter-ransomware. In addition to cooperation, we also need trust and transparency. In our experience, trust between the police, security authorities, and the victims of an attack is necessary to combat ransomware. This was illustrated during the very interesting session with the private companies. Information sharing has been a topic in most of our session these 2 days. It's a challenging topic. However, we feel that the CRI is a perfect umbrella for developing practices and areas for information sharing. And better information sharing between the countries. Trust is also the preferred basis for sharing necessary information between a victim of an offense and the police. In Norway, we have a long-standing trust relationship between the relevant actors, and I believe this is a strength based on all members benefiting from such a cooperation. Just a small example. In 2019, the Norwegian oil company Hydro, with offices all over all the continents in the world, was attacked by ransomware. The attack costed Hydro $100 million. The organized criminals behind the attack was also suspected to have caused 1,800 attacks in a total of 71 countries. Hydro demonstrated transparency, shared information, and cooperated with the police during the investigation. After an extensive and international investigation with cooperations with quite a few of the countries around the table here, criminals were arrested and the encryption keys were found. Without such trust and international cooperation, uncovering this criminal network and finding the encryption key would have been very challenging. Countering cybercrime is a high priority for Norway. We place focus on strengthening the capacity to combat such crime. One area of strengthening our capacity is through international cooperation, such as this great initiative. So thank you for attention, and I'm looking forward to see you again at the next summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norway. We'll now turn to Poland.
Thank you very much. The warmest thanks to our American hosts. I have to say, I don't think we have ever been so close together as today. So the counter-ransomware initiative gives a lot of hope for the future of fighting this exponentially growing threat to national security. And I have 3 points of my own, like my colleagues had before. First of all, I would like to stress that we have no time to spare, and I hope that the can-do attitude that is in this room, we will be able to take back to our home countries, go straight through the legal, security, and all the other teams to make actionable items from our meeting possible as soon as we can. And I hope that we will have many CRI members using the Lithuanian MISP, the Indian malware Kosh, and the Israeli and UAE system as soon as possible, because that will be a measurable way to calculate our success. Second of all, I have very high hopes for the exchange of ideas in the policy part. During our conversations, especially the ones between the sessions, I think we found out that we face very similar problems in our countries. And the good news is that for each of these problems, at least one country has found a way to make significant progress. So if we exchange information, if we exchange the TTPs to achieve success in fighting ransomware, then I think we will be able to progress a lot quicker than we have to date. And third and final point I would like to make is that seeing as our summit has been a success, I think we should make possible another event, but for the operational people that work in our respective agencies and our countries. I think that if we want to get the flow of information going as quick as possible, and I understand that this is what everyone has agreed upon, these are the people that will actually make that happen. So the sooner the better, and I definitely hope they enjoy their mini CRI summit as much as we have enjoyed ours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Poland. And that wise advice really ties very much to the discussion of the Joint Ransomware Task Force, operationalizing a lot of what we've talked about and linking across the communities that we need to effectively connect to fight ransomware. So thank you. Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the U.S. government for hosting this important meeting, and to you, Chair, for your excellent leadership throughout the process. The discussions during the last 2 days served as a valuable opportunity to better understand today's evolving ransomware threats and identify where our close cooperation and collective actions are needed. Today, the threats have been growing to be more prevalent and sophisticated globally. The situation in Korea is not different, with an approximate 80% increase in reported ransomware attack cases compared to the previous year. In response to these rising challenges, the Korean government introduced a comprehensive policy named the Plan to Strengthen Responses to Ransomware last year. This plan includes various measures to enhance prevention, responses, capacity building, and international cooperation against ransomware. Among the measures are the expansions of cyber exercise of the critical infrastructure, establishment of the software development and security hub, and stronger link between the information sharing systems of the private and public sectors, and artificial intelligence-based analysis of ransomware types and patterns. We hope to share our experiences coming out from implementing these new policies going forward. As discussed in the Diplomatic Responses Working Group, capacity building remains one of the key to eliciting responsible behaviors in the cyberspace. To this end, the Korean government is actively participating in global and regional cooperation for cyber capacity building. As a sponsor of the UN General Assembly resolution to establish program of action for advancing responsible state behavior in cyberspace, Korea would like to underscore the need to establish action-oriented mechanisms within the UN, specifically to enhance peaceful implementation of norms and encourage the exchange of the best practices and capacity building. Furthermore, as a co-chair of the ASEAN Regional Forum Intersessional Meeting on ICT Security, Korea is actively participating in the capacity building efforts against the cyber threats within the region. Online learning platforms, internships, and training programs will be provided by many relevant Korean authorities to cultivate cyber security professionals in the region. And also we are planning to host a gathering of ASEAN member states next year to further improve our cooperation. Chair, there was a discussion in this year's meeting to come up with cross-sectoral tools to fight ransomware, suggesting establishment of the International Counter-Ransomware Task Force. Korea will join the efforts of the member states of the initiative to make our cooperation mechanisms more result-oriented, including discussion on how to optimally structure the task force. The critical importance of the stronger partnership among various stakeholders has been reconfirmed in this year's meeting. Our experiences have clearly suggested that the state-centric approach can no longer be a solution. Today we had a very valuable opportunity to listen to the voice of the industry, and I hope that the discussion will be a good starting point to facilitate effective partnership with the private sector to address ransomware threats together. Thank you very much. Korea will remain fully committed to working in solidarity with the partners around this table to establish a secure cyberspace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate Korea's commitment. Romania.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the Romanian delegation is privileged to attend the second summit of counter-ransomware initiative. We salute both the overall concept of this initiative as well as the robustness of the work carried out so far. We see the CRI as an example of outstanding leadership of our US partners in their intention to bring us together in the fight against this common threat. A special message of gratitude goes to you, Anne, for your important contribution at the success of this conference. Thank you very much. We have also a message of appreciation for the very good work done by our chairs in their working groups. Romania will continue to play its role in the fight against ransomware. We will continue to have a zero-tolerance policy towards actors carrying out cybercrime operations from our territory, and we will continue to employ the full extent of the law in counteracting them. Throughout 2022, ransomware threats have targeted both the public and the private sector in Romania, representing one of the top 3 threats to our cybersecurity, based on frequency and number of attacks. Threat actors have primarily targeted our health, oil, and public administration domains. Our commitment within the CRI must be a long-term one. Such effort must include the development of capacities, of legal frameworks, and of common tactical, operational, and policy approaches. We support a multi-stakeholder approach to increasing our security and resilience to these threats. As we heard today, the private sector in particular has a key role to play in preventing, reducing, and responding to ransomware threats. The cooperation and partnership between the public and the private sector is an objective need, and we have to build and expand it through constant efforts. We are also committed to assisting partners in need to increase their capacity to deal with the threat from ransomware. Most importantly, however, our commitments must be of responsible state conduct, including in manifesting zero tolerance to threat actors within our territories. When responsible state conduct is intentionally and repeatedly disregarded, we must be prepared to act together in calling out the responsible parts, as such breaches could have consequences for the rule-based international order and pose long-term risks for us all. For Romania, ransomware is not only a crime, as we cannot completely detach ransomware from the broader cyber threat landscape, and is also about values. We must protect the open, safe, and secure cyberspace against those who argue that freedom is just one of many options. In the end, I would like to thank our US colleagues for bringing us together. We can only fight this threat together as like-minded group and set the path ahead together. You may count on Romania in advancing all the objectives of this initiative and the ambitious work plan proposed today. Thank you, and I'm looking forward for our next meeting. And on a more personal note, I have a few pictures with President Biden, but I have no picture with Vice President Kamala Harris. So please share with us a copy of the picture we done together this morning. Thank you.
You were already in a picture on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
We will download it from there.
Thank you. Sweden.
Well, thank you. I would like just to start by thanking Nate, Chris, but most of all, Anne, of course, for this. But actually, most of all, your team. Just looking over there, for instance, thank you. We've all been you, and we know how much work it is to put something like this together. So thank you to everyone for that. There's been a lot happening since we last gathered in this forum virtually. Russia's aggression against Ukraine has led to a severely deteriorating global security environment, and I just want to take this opportunity to reiterate our support, that our support for Ukraine remains unwavering. Security threats are becoming ever more complex, and the ransomware threat is in particular, dare I say, a smorgasbord of different characteristics of the emerging global threat landscape. So it's both a technical, regulatory, financial, foreign policy, national security challenge all at once. And it also requires making policy decisions with incomplete information in a fast-changing technological landscape. So in other words, this is exactly the type of problem that make most bureaucrats very, very sad and start looking for exits and chocolate. I'm pretty sure, actually, that there are some bureaucrats among us, or at least in Sweden, that were, dressed up as ransomware for Halloween this year. At the same time, the effects are so clear and profound. I mean, it leads to people not being able to buy food, they lose their life's work, affects the security of our healthcare, energy supply, the financial sector, but it also really puts our interdependence in the spotlight. And when Kaseya was hit, I was actually on an island in the Stockholm archipelago, enjoying the Swedish week of summer. I had two thoughts when that happened. One was I will not be able to get food because there's only one store on this island, and that was very unfortunate, and it made me very sad. Second thought, though, was that if a cyber attack on a company in Miami is preventing me from getting meatballs and herring for my kids in a remote island in Sweden, I'm really living in a very interconnected world. So I came to think that our joint prosperity really rests on digital foundations. And I think our reaction to these types of threats really must be not to retreat to national capacities. Well, not believing that we'll be able to solve this problem through more sovereignty or independence. I think we need digital solidarity on this issue. I think that's also why this meeting is so encouraging. It's very rare to see not just such a diverse group of countries, but also such a diverse set of participants from each country. There's here we have people working across countries, ministries, agencies, and companies. And I think this is really one of the few areas where we have as many facets of the participants as the threat itself is. I also think we really desperately need to come back to a more positive and future-oriented vision of what global cyberspace can be, something that can drive collaboration and innovation. And I think this summit really represents an important step in that direction. Sweden has a new government since a few weeks back. Cyber and technology policy will be a priority for us. Also, as we move to our presidency of the EU in the spring, I can also announce that we will be, together with Rwanda, be facilitating the negotiations on the new Global Digital Compact in the United Nations. And we really look forward to collaborating with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, both for the insightful comments and for the call to action that you gave. I neglected to skip the colleague to my left, Singapore, with thanks as well for co-leadership of the Countering Illicit Finance panel.
Thank you very much. First, on behalf of Singapore, I want to thank the US NSC and all the staff for organizing and convening this summit, and for your personal leadership in this initiative. Ransomware is a cross-border problem. It's essential that countries work together, shoulder to shoulder, if we want to effectively combat ransomware. Countering ransomware is also a cross-domain problem. It requires cybersecurity expertise, law enforcement levers, financial supervision, public-private partnerships, and diplomatic engagement, as evidenced by the diverse friends that we have around the room. Just last month, at the Singapore International Cyber Week, Singapore announced that we had formed our own domestic National Counter-Ransomware Task Force earlier this year. As we worked on it in parallel, it was striking to me how our conversations both at this international CRI and our domestic task force were so similar. There are obvious synergies in our domestic work and the international work. I also am leaving here more optimistic. Ransomware, as I've learned, is a manageable problem if we break it down to the component parts. The bad guys, as someone told me, also have budgets and bosses. They have their own challenges. If we work together, we can starve them of oxygen, we can make their environment more hostile for them, and break their business models. Ransomware is a common threat to our respective countries, companies, and citizens. It poses economic, social, and even national security harm to us. Interestingly, we are all facing a common threat. The bad guys are out there. We are all on the same side. This is an area where countries from a wide political spectrum can find common cause and work together collaboratively by staying focused on objective and practical solutions. With our shared commitment and conviction to act against ransomware, we can make meaningful progress towards establishing a rules-based multilateral order in cyberspace, one which is in accordance with international law, the UN Charter, and the norms of responsible state behavior in the use of ICTs, from the United Nations GGE process previously, and the ongoing OEWG process, which Singapore has the honor to chair. This will allow for a cyberspace that is more stable, secure for our citizens, businesses across the world. Singapore has been honored to participate in this CRI effort, and we look forward to making further contributions down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Singapore. We now turn it to Spain, with thank you to Spain for leading the Public-Private Partnership Working Group as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for your leadership all along these 2 days, and thank you also to your team, fantastic team with their enthusiasm and their professionalism and their human touch at the same time. Spain welcomes the visible success of this initiative, which already brings together so many partners, united in the face of a common challenge, which is the fight against ransomware. Spain has been working during these months in the field of private-public partnership, contributing with our national experience. And I would like also to praise and to thank the work done by my colleagues of the Ministry of Interior, and also of those colleagues and partners that have been working in the same working group. And to all colleagues here around this table, from whom I learned so much during these 2 days. Ransomware is a threat to states, to private companies, and especially to our citizens. It is therefore necessary to address this challenge from a comprehensive approach and at all times encourage public-private collaboration. The private sector owns and operates a large part of our country's infrastructures, hence including them in the debate is essential to achieve greater resilience. But when we talk about public-private partnership, I'm not only talking about collaboration between government agencies and private companies, but also about collaboration with society at large, from independent experts to think tanks, academia, and citizens, as they are the main stakeholders and end users of digital services. Raising awareness among civil society must be a priority. Although public opinion attention focuses on attacks on large companies, ransomware attacks target any small and medium-sized enterprise and individuals. The social impact that this type of attack can have is too severe and deserves utmost attention. Moreover, increasing public-private synergies will allow for a better understanding of the threat and a more comprehensive response. Engaging citizens and other stakeholders will help expand the visibility of the public sector in the fight against ransomware and simultaneously increase the efficiency of cybersecurity measures, both financially and in terms of threat awareness. Information sharing is key to gaining an accurate picture of risks, vulnerabilities, and threats. Systematizing and institutionalizing the exchange of information will be a good step forward. In that sense, we welcome the establishment of the Counter-Ransomware Task Force to improve our analysis by exchanging intelligence, as well as the pilot information sharing platform to facilitate such exchanges with the private sector. Finally, the fragmentation of cyberspace continues to grow, but regional and international cooperation can bridge the gap in knowledge, technologies, best practices, and capabilities to fight ransomware. Cooperation with other countries in capacity building must be a priority across the screen and at all levels. In this regard, we are confident that the proposed capacity-building tool can help countries and stakeholders to maximize synergies with the private sector and increase their resilience in dealing with ransomware threats. Spain will remain committed to support and actively participate in this necessary initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Spain, for that commitment. We turn now to Switzerland.
Switzerland is grateful to the US for organizing this very productive summit. Thank you also to the chairs of the working groups who have been instrumental over this past year to the successful work of the working groups. Ransomware attacks can have widespread consequences and cause considerable damage and human harm. Ransomware actors operate in all corners of the world, so a cross-regional approach is essential. Switzerland joined the CRI because we believe that international cooperation is key to address and counter ransomware. The CRI provides an excellent framework to exchange information and lessons learned on the key elements that make up the ransomware ecosystem, from technical to diplomatic aspects. The working groups provide valuable platforms for comparison, exchange, and discussion among relevant national experts. Those exchanges are conducted in an open and transparent way, based on mutual trust. From Switzerland's perspective, this has provided a very valuable opportunity to draw comparisons with the actions of national agencies of other states, including law enforcement, technical cybersecurity experts, and cyber diplomats, to examine our own systems and models. Allow me to mention a couple of points that are particularly important for Switzerland. Efforts to counter ransomware must be consistent with the national law of the states involved, as well as with the international law. This includes international human rights law. Indeed, efforts to combat cybercrime are designed to protect the human rights, not to undermine them. For Switzerland, it is key that the rights people have offline must also be protected online. An important part of these efforts should be a consistent and strong implementation of the Financial Advisory Task Force standards applying to virtual asset service providers, including the travel rule. The standards are an important tool to prevent and disrupt the threat resulting from ransomware. Capacity building is essential for all states to contribute to the goal of countering ransomware. We are looking forward to discussing and sharing within the CRI positive examples that aim to build the capacity of states to enforce relevant laws and to improve their ability to cooperate effectively and internationally, also in the realm of innovative technology to build secure systems that provide a more secure internet and digital infrastructure. Because the majority of the internet infrastructure is operated by the private sector, strong partnerships with the private sector are key. It is important that those partnerships are based on clear understanding of roles and responsibilities that allow for a high level of trust. It is important to enable and encourage reporting of ransomware acts at national as well as international level. A solid basis for decision-making is key for successful cooperation. With a view to the future work of CRI, there are already a number of well-functioning tools in use that allow for sharing of technical and other information and support cooperation, many operated by the private sector. We believe that the CRI is an excellent platform to present and discuss those tools, including how they could be better put to use. In our view, it is key to avoid the creation of duplicate structures at this point and leverage existing tools and initiatives. Switzerland is committed to continue to support the work of the Counter-Ransomware Initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. We now turn to Ukraine.
Thank you. There was a great summary by Switzerland of pretty much everything we talked about for the past 2 days. I could say there have been productive discussions, great ideas, major challenges for all of us, but inspiring opportunities. It is clear that we are united in our vision and understanding of what needs to be done and how we will be facing the challenges to come. Considering the interlinked nature of the world, information systems and infrastructure. Being in the midst of the next industrial revolution, cyberspace has become at the core of our lives, fully global and common for us all. So countering ransomware has become an issue of national and global security together with other cybersecurity initiatives. Ukraine's started systematic implementation of many of the initiatives discussed here in 2016 by adopting the National Security Strategy, National Cybersecurity Strategy, and by building relevant capacities and resilience. So our experience demonstrates that such initiatives work. This is what helped us combat extreme attacks targeted on the government and on operators of critical infrastructure during this year. We continue to build on our capacities, and there's really a great opportunity and a great need for enhanced collaboration at multiple levels that we see amongst national authorities, with the operators of critical infrastructure in the private sector, and with international partners, in order to prepare for the challenges to come over the next years and decades. We must also make efforts to educate the society, the private and the public sector, starting with our younger groups and the growing generations. Cyber hygiene and security must become an integral part of our education systems and social media campaigns. We see that CRI has a great potential to become a platform for a full scope of cybersecurity cooperation by building corresponding frameworks, the diplomatic, the legal, and the technical. There were some great ideas, and there's a lot of work done that already shows these frameworks are available for us to use and develop. And there was a great slogan, security by design. I believe that in each of these domains, we should have this as our long-term vision and goal. On a final note, we all thank US for the leadership, and I would like to join and say thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your team. Thanks to your team for all the work done to have the CRI second summit. But leadership starts with a vision, and I would suggest that we all get acquainted with the US National Security Strategy released in October this year, because it highlights the challenges we face for the years to come, and more importantly, the values that I am sure we all share as the members of the civilized society. Closing the speech, I would like to thank for the high level of representation from the US, which really highlights that cybersecurity and cyberspace is one of the great and most important areas in our lives for the next years to come. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. And I echo the remarks over these 2 days of all of the CRI members expressing support for Ukraine's courage, innovation, and commitment during this very, very difficult time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the support from the international community to all the countries.
Thank you. United Arab Emirates.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for everybody actually participating here. We'd like to express our gratitude to the United States for the opportunity to provide feedback on the future plans for this international collaboration in the field of cybercrime, and more specifically in the ransomware. It's a key topic for the future prosperity of the United Arab Emirates and its digital economy. Recently, the UAE expressed great amount of such cyber attacks, and in large percentage of those attacks were ransomware. The UAE identified this inherent cyber risk and cyber attacks mostly as ransomware. The UAE identified as well and expressed many of those cyber attacks uses virtual currencies as the platform of exchanging those ransoms. We in UAE expand the vision of UAE as well as the cybersecurity strategy of UAE and its primary goal, which is developing and implementing a comprehensive cybersecurity framework to create safe and strong cybersecurity infrastructure across the UAE and the globe. The UAE contributes to the robust cybersecurity regulatory and legal framework, which covers cybercrime, securing emerging and existing technology, while also implementing national incident response plans to promote swift and coordinated response to cyber incidents. Additionally, we as well CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team, help to improve practices of information sharing as well as information security and protect IT infrastructures in the UAE and the globe from cyber risks such as ransomware. The UAE is making concrete efforts to collaborate and share information and insights of such attacks, and seeking to improve as well its current relationship with various international government authorities. The aim is not only to help improve our own cybersecurity postures, but to work shoulder to shoulder together in building stronger and cybersecurity landscape for all other nations as well. Specifically, and based on those 2 days of great discussions, we emphasize on the following points. One, government and all of us, governments, recognize the importance and the need for urgent actions and common priorities and complement efforts to reduce the risk of ransomware. Efforts will include improving network resiliency to prevent incidents when possible and respond effective when incidents do occur. We also committed to work together and with private sectors to promote improvements to basic cyber hygienes and post-network resiliency and mitigate the risk of ransomware. Nations as well should consider appropriate steps to promote incident of information sharing between ransomware entities or victims and relevant law enforcement and cyber emergency response team. We're taking as well actions to disrupt the ransomware businesses, and for that it requires concrete efforts to address illicit finance risk, as we saw in one of the great working group. And this includes virtual assets and primary instrument criminals used for ransom payments and subsequent money laundering. We must all act to degrade and hold accountable ransomware criminals, operators, as well as cooperate together with each other on international partners in many of the enhancement and the exchange of information that we actually do frequently. In addition to disrupting those ransomware ecosystem, diplomatic efforts as well in one of the groups can promote rules and based behavior and encourage all states to take reasonable steps to address those operations as well as within their territories. UAE remains committed to working with the CRI members and promote global law enforcement and security organizations to build a systematic approach towards capability building and awareness programs toward countering ransomware. We as well develop standard and best practices that will help to consolidate efforts and standardize responses to ransomware attacks that will align with the capabilities building as well as awareness programs, which include one of the major things that we always and we all agree on, information sharing mechanism. And that include one of the frameworks such as the one proposed by our partner India and Lithuania, or the ones that we as well work together with our partner in Israel to work on that one-stop shop. Looking forward for more and more collaboration with you all, and really appreciate again being with you here. And thank you again very much for everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the UAE. We'll now turn to the United Kingdom with thank you as well for co-leading the Countering Illicit Finance Working Group.
Thank you, and there are benefits and disadvantages to coming relatively late in the alphabet. Lots of time to prepare your remarks, but then everyone said what you were going to say already. So I'll keep it pretty brief. Thank you to the US for their great leadership and for hosting this summit. It's been hugely valuable to meet in person, to keep up the momentum and plan our work for the year ahead. The UK has been particularly honoured to co-lead the Counter Illicit Finance work stream with Singapore, and we look forward to continuing that leadership role next year. We're particularly honoured, firstly, because ransomware is now a national security imperative for the UK that harms our government, our business, our citizens every day on an increasing scale. Secondly, we're honoured to lead the work stream because, as we've discussed over these last 2 days, following the money and reducing the profitability and the attractions of ransomware as a crime to the criminals is fundamental to the success of our endeavours. So we look forward to continuing our work next year. It needs to be done on a global basis to be effective, so the CRI can play an invaluable role, and we look forward to it going from strength to strength. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the UK. So for the final comments, to Ambassador Nate Fick, the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been in this role only for 6 weeks, and I can say at this point with certainty that I have not sat in one place longer than I have for this, and it's been worth every minute of it. Trust is the currency of the digital world, and gatherings like this one build trust. They build shared context, and ultimately they build durable consensus. And I've always loved the phrase durable consensus, durable being the key piece, because our consensus will be most important when things are most challenging. And so thank you, Anne, for your personal leadership in making this happen. And thanks to all of you for all the work that got us to this point. Now onward, I want to be concrete in 3 areas. My colleagues and I are committed to working with this group to leverage diplomatic channels to reinforce your initiatives, whether to deepen law enforcement cooperation and information sharing or to deny criminals their illicit proceeds. Second, we are committed to continuing to work with you to develop and fund innovative capacity building tools and programs, not just for those countries represented in this room, but also for our global partners who struggle to marshal the resources and expertise to combat this threat. I'm especially interested, as we discussed earlier, in the first 1 or 2 of those programs on the theory that compounding is a powerful force in life. Good gets better, bad gets worse. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Whatever analogy you want to use, how we get started will have an outsized effect on how we continue. Third, we pledge to continue to work with international partners to further the framework of responsible state behavior in cyberspace, to deepen support for its voluntary norms, and, where necessary, to call out and seek accountability for states that sponsor ransomware actors or turn a blind eye to their activities. We've heard repeatedly that our adversaries are not kids in hoodies. They're well-trained, they're funded, professionally organized, they're innovative, and they evolve. But so are we. And that's the most important message for me from the last 2 days, and it's what makes me proud to be a part of this initiative. This summit, we need to remember, is not just about those of us assembled here today. It's about the hundreds of departments and agencies and ministries, the thousands of civil servants, and the hundreds of millions of citizens who stand behind us in support. The technologists, the law enforcement officers, policymakers, diplomats, nurses, doctors, and teachers who refuse to accept the national security and economic consequences of failure. So, on behalf of my colleagues, I thank you all for your contributions, for your partnership, for your clarity of purpose, and I look forward to all that we can achieve in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll briefly summarize our comments. As Australia began, we are in this together, and as our Irish colleagues noted, but we're all powerful when we are together. Ransomware is a borderless challenge, and as such, we take it on in a way that truly crosses borders and crosses disciplines. It's both a criminal and a national security issue, and we discuss specific outcomes across policy, for example, sharing and coordinating policies on ransom payments and insurance payments, capacity building, and we discuss specific models of those here with thank you to the countries that offered them. And finally, standing up a joint ransomware task force to operationalize across the 3 disciplines that are core to our work, beginning in the first quarter of 2023. We highlighted the role of the private sector and really welcome the private sector into our discussions. Global companies representing the global nature of what they contribute invisibility, and mitigation. And the fact sheet and our joint statement has now been made public. So on behalf of the working group co-leads, with thank you for the work they put in during this past year and looking forward to the work coming, thank you to all for attending. I also echo your thanks to the team across the National Security Council, the Office of the National Cyber Director for pulling together these 2 days of events. And with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor. As you can see, he immediately joined us shoulder to shoulder. That has been the joke, how closely we have been sitting together for today specifically. Jake's leadership and understanding of the threat ransomware poses and cyber poses to our national security, and his dedication to building international partnerships to solve challenging problems has really made the Counter-Ransomware Initiative a success, and we are grateful. Jake, over to you.
Well, thank you, Anne, for your leadership, and Chris for yours, and Nate, but especially to all of you for being here and for taking the time. We're trying out a new theory that the closer everyone sits together, the more you cooperate. So we'll, next time we'll even remove the space between chairs and just really shove everyone in tight. Also, as a public service announcement, this wristband will get you all you can drink at the rave later tonight. So just flash it at any bar in Washington and they'll serve you. Honestly, I know you guys have talked a lot, listened a lot, worked through a lot, and I want to come on to some of the specifics that are at the heart of the Counter-Ransomware Initiative. But I actually wanted to close this out by taking a little bit of a step back and sharing the thinking of the Biden administration for why this initiative and this issue is not just confined to cyberspace, is not just confined to a particular challenge within cyberspace, but really is a hallmark of our national security approach as a whole. We released our national security strategy just a couple of weeks ago. And it was a product that really drew from consultations with a lot of countries seated around this table. And at its core, what the national security strategy reflects and represents is that you cannot neatly divide between foreign policy and domestic policy any longer in the approach to national security, that that's just not the world that we live in anymore. So we have built our national security approach on the foundational integration of foreign policy and domestic policy. And that means elevating our focus on the issues that spill out of those two silos, whether it's supply chains or the energy transition or tax policy, or especially cybersecurity. From day one, the Biden administration has really put cybersecurity at the top of our list. And Anne was kind enough to take the first ever role as Deputy National Security Advisor for cyber in an NSC, in a White House in history, because we wanted to build and integrate an entire cyber component at a very senior level at the heart of the National Security Council. And so this connects across everything that we do. And we've tried to drive a range of different lines of effort in the cyber domain. First, focusing on cybersecurity and safety here at home. Last year, President Biden signed an executive order that requires new baseline standards for software sold to the US government. A lot of it that is also used and bought by countries around the world. It's an effort that we hope will raise the game for software, not just for our country, but for all of your countries as well. And it was interesting when we came in and found that this simply was absent. There was no standard upon which this software was built. Now, we came to office, of course, just a couple of months after the SolarWinds hack was brought to public attention. And of course, SolarWinds was shot through every corner of the US government, as well as many of your governments. And it was a very bracing learning lesson for us to learn. We've also worked across our government to create landmark cybersecurity standards in critical infrastructure sectors, from airports to water systems to pipelines to railroads. And in fact, it was a ransomware incident last year, the Colonial Pipeline attack, that really drove home the need for these standards. And as many of you know, working it in your own systems, there's a lot of gnashing of teeth and a lot of blood on the floor working with critical infrastructure sectors to get these standards not just written, but actually implement it in a full way. And it requires a genuine level of public-private partnership that is almost unique across the national security enterprise to protect our countries from all manner of cyber attacks, including ransomware attacks. And our work is by no means done, but we're going to go sector by sector to ensure that we have standard cybersecurity practices for the critical infrastructure owners in every domain of critical infrastructure. Second, working with our partners, we focused on securing new technologies. I know that you all have talked about digital assets, addressing the way that illicit crypto crosses borders and fuels cyber actors, criminal cyber actors. We're also in the final stages, in consultation with some of you around this table, of creating a labeling program for the Internet of Things, and particularly for IoT devices, so that consumers that bring home those devices know that they're bringing home a secure device. This is something that some of you have pioneered, and we're learning lessons from that ourselves in trying to develop a almost like Energy Star program for cybersecurity and the Internet of Things. And we want to make sure that what we put in place is compatible with those of you who've already done it and those of you who will follow suit. Third, of course, and the last 2 days have been a good indication of this, we've been focused on really strengthening collaboration with our partners, to doing this in partnership with other countries, because any one country solving their cyber problem is not really getting after the root of this problem, which is a network problem that affects all of us. So we've been trying to build diverse and flexible coalitions that tackle a transnational threat like cyber, and that too is a hallmark of President Biden's foreign policy across the board. We've shared information regarding cyber threats to protect critical infrastructure across the entire globe on every continent with dozens of countries. We've worked with countries to implement the norms of the UN-endorsed framework for responsible behaviors in cyberspace. We've created the virtual cyber incident support capability with our NATO allies to more effectively lend cyber resources and support in moments of need. We're driving the development of new cyber tools with our Quad partners. And as sort of the flagship in collaboration, we were very proud to help, along with the rest of you, launch this counter-ransomware initiative last year, and to see how far it's come in 1 year, and to see the path ahead and how promising it looks. As everybody here knows, and as you all have reinforced in your comments over the last couple of days, ransomware is a global challenge that requires global cooperation to produce global solutions. And that's why, in fact, this coalition is the largest in the world in terms of a cybersecurity coalition, and the most comprehensive, bringing together countries and companies from all regions of the globe to deter and disrupt these ransomware attacks. I want to particularly thank Australia, Singapore, the United Kingdom, India, Lithuania, Spain, Germany, the CRI working group leads, who have made sure that this collaboration is broadly shared, brings diverse perspectives, and really creates a platform upon which the collaboration of all of us going forward can be built. Having already had 2 exercises with respect to building our resilience, so CRI members across the world can bolster their ability to coordinate during a potential cyber attack. You've also strengthened our defense, developing ways to disrupt ransomware actors and countering their illicit financing, particularly in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And collectively, you've deepened our collaboration, creating a new platform to facilitate information sharing and build enduring partnerships with the private sector. And as Anne has just described, over the last 2 days, you've done more. Whether it is about combating the ability of ransomware actors to use virtual assets, including through an investigator's toolkit, delivering justice to ransomware actors and their enablers by standing up a joint task force in the first quarter of next year as a due out from this meeting, ensuring our national cyber infrastructure is not being used in ransomware attacks by sharing information regarding malware and techniques so that we can all collectively defend better, and of course, strengthening our diplomatic cooperation to deny safe haven to ransomware actors. And I want to especially thank Nigeria's agreement to co-lead this stream of work with our German colleagues for the coming year. I was also pleased to see over the course of the last couple of hours that you've integrated for the first time the private sector and private companies from across the world into these CRI conversations, because as we all know, sometimes to our benefit, sometimes to our detriment, hopefully more and more to our benefit, private firms and companies often have the key information before we have it as governments, so we need to work together. And then finally, you all know even better than I do, and it's not obviously limited to ransomware or to cyber, but it is, I think, especially acute in this area. We have to continue to work overtime to break barriers within each of our own governments, bringing together policy, intelligence, finance, legal, law enforcement, and every other conceivable kind of tool to combat ransomware. So let me just close by saying that over the last few days, we've seen how this international, integrated, innovative approach can really drive results. And I really just want to express the gratitude of President Biden, my personal gratitude, our entire team here at the White House, between the National Security Council, the Office of the National Cyber Director, our colleagues at the State Department and other agencies. We have a long way to go, but we've already come a long way. And the momentum we've built, to pick up where Nate left off, objects in motion can stay in motion if we keep pushing them forward. And that's what I think collectively we should all do. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you today. But more importantly, thank you for bringing a spirit of collaboration and deep substance, expertise, and wisdom to our collective effort. And I think let's just keep making the kind of progress we've made over the course of the past year, and we will really get after this problem. Thank you.